When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past and about the future.
Welcome back to Draft Vice. I am back. We are here. Took a little bit of a break. I meant to come back last week. After I meant to come back weekly after last week, but what happened was I was going to have a guest on the podcast, had a couple of technical issues, scheduling was off, because I was going to talk about a couple of these things we're talking about today. By the way, let's get into it. Welcome back to Draft Vice. I am Walter, and today we are talking about the Washington McSynders changing their name, Patrick Mahomes getting a brand new contract, 10 years extended. He will be a Kansas City Chief for the next 12 years unless he gets cut at a certain point. And then also the other two contracts are very big. Chris Jones gets an extension. Myles Garrett gets an extension. You get 100. You get 85. You get $500 million. Yes, it's a bunch of money. So right off the bat, we'll go into the contracts, and we'll wrap up the show with the Washington McSynders. The new names that they are seeking, they are retiring the old name, the R-word name. If you can remember correctly what that was, you don't need me to tell you. You got the Google. But while we're at it, let's go right into it, right? Pat Mahomes gets a 10-year, $500 million extension. $477 million in guaranteed mechanisms. What does that mean, you mean? Well, it means some of those years might become guaranteed a couple years ahead of time, right? So, because what happens is fully guaranteeing a $500 million contract, I mean, there are very few owners who could fully guarantee $500 million. Which means, because what happens is when you fully guarantee a contract, you got to put money in escrow, and where are you getting $500 million is just stick in escrow for that whole time. So what happened here is that, say he's on the team in 2021, his contract in 2023 and 2024 are guaranteed. So it basically it creates a structure where the team can't cut him unless they're willing to just guarantee that money and take the cap hit during those years. So it basically guarantees him the money for the contract without fully guaranteeing the contract. It allows him to pay out differently. And this is a structure that's become very popular in recent years. It's part of the Ryan Tannehill structure. And we keep hearing about it more because it's become a way of, it's not just injury guarantee, because that's become, I think players are getting smart to that as far as avoiding just getting injury guarantees, because they're like, oh, well, if I get injured, it's totally fine. But then you realize you're fighting with the team about what's considered an injury. So a lot of them are saying, we're not doing that shit no more. We want fully guaranteed, and we want guarantee mechanisms. So $477 million in guaranteed mechanisms. He has ability to opt out if those payments aren't made. There's currently a no trade clause in the contract. Way to go, Pat Mahomes, being one of the few guys who could actually negotiate that in. Then they also, if you look at the average annual salary, right? From, obviously you're hearing this and you're going, average annual salary for the next 10 years. Because, it's 470, he's not making $500 million, right? It's a $503 million contract, but let's be real. He's got to meet certain, he's got to make it to the Super Bowl, every year and throw for 5,000 yards. And those, you almost never meet the full area, the full, height of the contract, right? He's not going to make $503 million. Maybe he will, but not from this contract alone. So what's going to end up happening is that, it's really the $477 million, which is a lot of money still. And over the life of this contract, it's about $45 to $50 million. But really, when you look over the next 12 years, you're looking at when you look at the 2 years he's got left. This is a big part of this, right? I talked about this before with the Jamal Adams thing. It's an extension, and the money's going on the extension. Right, so they get cap relief for the next 2 years under his current contract, but he's getting paid now. It's great. It's a nice win-win situation. This is why you extend players while they're on their rookie deal. It creates cap relief. It gets you them locked up for a good price early on, and they get money ahead of time. And it's a great way to operate your structure, if you will. So, Pat Mahomes, for the next 12 years, a decade, and then 2 more years, he will probably be a Kansas City Chief. And he will be making about an average of $40 million a year over the next 12 years. Imagine that, man. This guy's going to be able to own a team if he wants to. Well, not really. That's a multi-billion-dollar deal. But, dude, that's a cashola deal. So the funny thing with this contract, right, a lot of the players have contracts about, limiting what they can and can't do in the offseason. His contract has a lot of limits in it. He can't play basketball, can't play baseball, he can't go on the jet ski. He's basically limited to playing football for the team and playing video games when he's at home. So, but not a bad sacrifice when you're making over almost $500 million and probably can, through the course of your career, make over that. In fact, some of the comments here have been that he's going to be making more over the course of this contract than what Eli did during his whole time being an NFL player. And so far, Eli's the one who has made the most during his career. Now, granted, Matt Stafford will probably beat out Eli. There's probably going to be a few people who beat out Eli's contracts, but still, that's a lot of money. And Pat Mahomes probably will be at least close. I think we will see. We will see the future of those contracts. Dude, was anybody going to say this is a bad move? Actually, the big rumor, right? The big rumor was he was going to get a percentage of the cap. This is something everybody's been talking about for years. I don't see it ever actually happening. Because the point of doing these, especially this early on in an extension, you would need a guy who walks out into free agency to be able to negotiate the percentage of the cap thing. That's what I believe, because you're not going to get a guy like Pat Mahomes who's got 2 years left on his deal. He doesn't have that much leverage at that point. He's got the leverage to make a lot of money, but a percentage of the cap is a lot. Like that's a big deal, because that'll permanently kind of like limit you on signing players. The benefit of getting this extension done is that you were saying, well, we are looking into the future, right? Right now, you were going to be the highest paid guy on the market if you went to free agency right now, right? So we're going to pay you that amount 2 years ahead of time. But and we're going to make sure you get that amount 2 years ahead of time. The problem is that they have no benefit then if they gave you a percentage of the cap, because the point of giving this extension is you were capping out what they are actually going to get, right? You were limiting the draw on resources. You were saying, we're giving you the highest paid contract now for a quarterback if they were to walk into free agency, but in 2 years when that contract actually kicks in, it might not be the highest amount for a quarterback at that time. It's what I was saying with the Jamal Adams situations. All relates back to contract situations, man. It's why I've been very much against what's been going on with how the Jets have handled Jamal Adams, and we will talk about other players who might be in similar but different situations later on in this podcast. So that's a big deal. By the way, not the only Chief who got an extension. Chris Jones got an extension, right? 85. Nobody thought this was going to happen, I think. I think a lot of people were like, oh, well, they extended Pat Mahomes. They got no money left. And then the Chiefs went, really? We'd like to raise you one. And they went ahead and they signed Chris Jones to an extension. They were coming up on the deadline, right? And there's two guys on this podcast we're going to talk about. Like, it came right up to the deadline, and they said, you know what? And by the way, I'll tell you what the deadline is, right? July 15th. There's the deadline. If the player's on the franchise tag, which Chris Jones and Derrick Henry were on the franchise tags, you have till July 15th to get an extension done. This was an issue with the Le'Veon Bell situation a couple years ago. So, but right now, the way it worked is it gives a deadline for players to be able to sign the tender and be able to to negotiate with the team. So, July 15th deadline. As I'm recording this contract, the July 15th deadline has passed. We're recording this podcast, yes. Anyway, so literally minutes before the end of the deadline, Derrick Henry gets an extension, $50 million, 4 years. We weren't talking about Derrick Henry, but I might as well go ahead and touch on it a little bit, and we'll talk about him again later on. And then about 2 years of that supposedly guaranteed. Chris Jones, a couple days ago, but still gets a 4-year, $85 million contract. Includes $60 million in total guarantees upon signing, right? That's a big deal. I'm actually a little shocked that was the extent of his contract, and then we're going to talk about Myles Garrett, who got more than that, I think. Now, I think he's got maybe about the same amount in guarantees. So, no, he doesn't have the same amount in guarantees. Never mind, I'm being stupid here. But nonetheless, 4-year contract. Now they got Chris Jones, an important piece of their defense, right? Great pass rusher, okay run defender, but you got this weapon who could just get after the passer. And again, the Chiefs are desperate for pieces on their defense. It seems like almost every year they're just kind of piecemealing it together, and they just want to beat you on offense. Totally makes sense. If I was the Chiefs, I might do the same thing. I'd at least try for a little bit on defense, kind of like what they're doing. So Chris Jones, again, lovely pass rusher, great player. I think everybody was thinking, oh, well, he's going to be on 1-year deal, or they'll trade him, or they'll do this. Like, they'll do what they did with not Houston, the guy who they traded to to San Francisco, where they tagged him and then they traded him for a second-round pick. I cannot remember off the top of my head. Outside linebacker. Houston got released at the same time, too. That was a big year where they just exodus of, like, defensive players. So I'll remember it later on, I'm sure. But they keep a guy now. They keep a guy. They didn't have a lot of cap space, but they had some, right? And part of this deal, right, part of the reason why they were able to do this is because of the cap relief they still have from Pat Mahomes' contract. Because remember, he's still like 2 more years left. They were able to maneuver this. So, listen, Pat Mahomes is going to be on a contract next year, but like his contract's not going to be like $40 million yet. So you're going to be able to utilize what you have left in cap relief. This is not thinking about COVID necessarily, but maybe they'll restructure it down the line anyway. You add voidable years on the back end of the contract. Also, there's a lot of talk about how that's getting negotiated with the NFLPA and the NFL, and how maybe they'll take 35% in reserves, and there's a lot of talk about right now with how they're going to deal with that going into the season, if there is a season. So, listen, I think the Chris Jones thing is great. Pat Mahomes thing, amazing. And now, listen, they have basically the same star players that they had when they went to the Super Bowl last year. They are keeping the team together. They are keeping the core basic principles of the team together. And by doing this, they are ensuring that they are at least recreating a lot of the similar things that got them to the Super Bowl and got them a Super Bowl win. So, listen, this is amazing. Congrats on the Chiefs. Let's go to the next guy on the list, right? Myles Garrett, my favorite player in the NFL currently, plays for my favorite team, the Cleveland Browns. Got a $125 million 5-year contract extension. So basically, he's locked up for the next 7 years, right? Got $50 million fully guaranteed. I'm actually a little shocked. I thought it'd be a little bit more than that. He's got $100 million in guarantees. So maybe the contract structure will be a little different. But honestly, with a lot of those kind of players, like usually the guys who get those like mechanisms that I was talking about with Pat Mahomes' contract, these might be just injury guarantees with Myles Garrett, or they might be kick-in guarantees, if you will. I think it's more along the lines of the injury guarantee route, though. I do not know the full details on that contract situation because that got released today, as did Chris Jones' situation came out yesterday. So, as of the time of recording this podcast, I'm happy, man. I'm very happy. I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. Myles Garrett, like I said before, one of my favorite players, star pass rusher for this team, is constantly being disruptive on that defensive line, and they knew they were going to lock him up. And this is what I'm saying. Good teams do this. They lock up great players and give them an extension. Now, I understand the argument with Jamal Adams is a little different position, but, dude, I love Myles Garrett. I'm glad they did it. And again, this is another thing where you look at the average on the contract, it's really not $25 million. It's $25 million on the extension. But, when you look at the average of the next 7 years, it's going to probably look a little bit closer to $21 million. So I think it's a great move. The Browns keep and by the way, they finally re-sign a first-round pick. How rare is that for the Browns? It's amazing. Granted, it took them having the number 1 overall pick 2 years in a row, but goddamn, that's great. I'm so happy. I like Myles Garrett a lot. I feel like I'm not even I feel like I'm not even like performing well on like showing you how happy I am on the video. But dude, I am very happy. One of my favorite players. I'm happy he got paid. And listen, he said it's Cleveland against the world. I agree with him. Let's go do it. All right. There's a couple other Cleveland news things. I'm going to pop these in here real quick. David Njoku, I mentioned it on. We have a Draft Vice TikTok. You can follow the Draft Vice TikTok. We have a Draft Vice Instagram. We've always been doing a Draft Vice Instagram. Go follow Draft Vice on those things. But with I mentioned on both of these platforms that David Njoku requested a trade, right? Kind of came out of nowhere, which is weird because he went to the and I think this is actually a bigger issue to talk about, right? He went to the throwing session with Baker Mayfield. They've gone through all like the OTAs, the virtual OTAs, and now he's requesting a trade, which is weird because again, like there's a thing called leverage, right? Don't get me wrong, like I love players, I want them to get paid. This doesn't sound like he's requesting to get paid. It sounds like playing time is an issue. But he's shown good chemistry with Baker Mayfield, right? The whole reason why he didn't have a good year last year was because he was injured. And also because the coaching staff and the front office were kind of out to get him a little bit. They did not want him to do well. When he came back from injury, there was a lot of talks he was going to get traded in this offseason. And he just did not get along with the Dorsey Kitchens fiasco, if you will. So David Njoku kind of went into this offseason almost sounding like he was going to get, fire sailed and sent somewhere else for like a late round pick. And then in comes Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, and Stefanski wants tight ends up the wazoo, right? They want to run a 2 or 3 tight end set quite often, right? They want to be able to utilize a 21 personnel. They want to pull the Kyle Shanahan, if you will. And a little bit of what he did when he was with Kubiak last year, where they had Irv Smith and Kyle Rudolph. So I love David Njoku. I think he's a good player. I think he has not hit his peak yet. I think they could utilize him. They signed Austin Hooper. I think that was a little bit of the worry is the playing time with Austin Hooper. Harrison Bryant might be performing really well. I don't know how you know if Harrison Bryant's performing well, though. Like, he's been in OTAs. He's a 4th-round pick. I don't think he's replacing Njoku this year. And Njoku really kind of needs to show that he's valuable to somebody, right? Nobody's going to pay up for him unless you're Bill O'Brien, and maybe you'll throw, like, a high-round pick for a tight end. Why not? He went ahead and signed Darren Fells off the street and then gave him an extension. But still, I like David Njoku. I think he's a really good player. I think he's got a lot of potential. And again, he has chemistry with Baker Mayfield. A lot of chemistry. He's got 2 years of chemistry with this guy. And I'm not talking about the class. And it showed the Baker Mayfield's first year with him. And he went to the throwing session. So there's something clearly strategic about this, that he doesn't think that he's going to get the playing time. Again, because Austin Hooper was signed in the offseason. But again, I think they are going to go a lot of 21 personnel and a lot of I think it's going to be a lot of mix and match or 22 personnel because they got a fullback now. And so I think that this is going to be I hope they keep him. I think Stefanski wants to keep him. I think that's why they have him. They went ahead and activated his 5th-year option. Now, that kind of gives them a little bit of potential trade value with him. Maybe even into next year, if a team is looking for a tight end and they look for cap relief for some extra picks or something, and he wants to push it next year, I think the idea is, and there's been some real talk about him wanting out of Cleveland, especially during the Kitchens era, for as short as that was. So I think Stefanski wants him. Barry went ahead and activated his 5th-year option. They went ahead and did it, so I think they want to keep him. They want to run 2 and 3 tight end sets. Now, as far as what this gets for Njoku, maybe he feels like, yeah, you know what, maybe this team will be great if I'm here. But I don't think we will. I won't pop personally. The team will be good, but I don't think my stats will be great. And I can understand that from a player's perspective. He wants to create a market for himself. He feels like the market for himself will not be great under Stefanski's system, mainly because his individual stats might suffer. We don't know that, though, because what I think Stefanski's looking to do is kind of do that, like, Gronk-Hernandez thing, where you have 2 really good tight ends, and you have to really make them kind of. And by the way, Njoku can line up at like X, like he is, which we've talked about on this podcast before. Split end. It's when you line off the side, line of scrimmage. He can line up anywhere along the line of scrimmage. He's an okay blocker. He's not the best, but he's not the worst either. He's actually solid. And maybe there were some questions about him blocking last year. I know Dorsey went ahead and critiqued him, but honestly, he was a better blocker than a lot of other guys who played for this team. So, I don't know. I like Njoku, as I said, a lot. So, that's my little rant on the Browns Njoku situation. Hopefully he stays. If he doesn't, I don't know what his market is. I don't know what his leverage is. On to the last player of the Browns that I want to quickly touch on is Olivier Vernon. They restructured his contract. There was a lot of talk that the Browns were in the market of going after Jadeveon Clowney, that they were going to pay him $15 million a year and cut Olivier Vernon. And then we hear a little bit of a contract restructure about Olivier Vernon, where basically they added in a no franchise tag clause, right, for Olivier Vernon, and but they went ahead and reduced his cap hit. They saved a couple million on his contract for this year, so they cleared a little bit of space, allowed him maybe sign another player. He gets a $7 million workout because remember he had $15.25 million going into this year, right? And that was none of it was guaranteed, so they could have cut him anytime this offseason. Now they go ahead, they guarantee $7 million as a signing bonus. They guarantee another $3.75 million in base salary, and then add a $250,000 workout bonus. I think he's gonna. I like Olivier Vernon. Again, like they added in a no franchise tag clause to the contract, so that way, like he doesn't do well this year, and then he can't get into the free open market. I like him. I'm glad that he's still on the team. I think he's a solid player. I was happy when they trade. I liked him when they traded for him. I think I had questions because the trade was also for one of their best offensive linemen, and we clearly saw how that went. So that was a good move. It created cap relief, gave him some, gave everybody in the room a little bit more. Like he got guaranteed money, so he knows he's here for the long haul. And then they turn around, they get a little bit of cap relief, right? So they know his contract hit is not as bad going into the year. He's making, probably around, 11 to 12 million. That's 3 or 4 million less than what he was making before. I don't think they were going to, Jadeveon Clowney is probably going to be like a trade, like an exact trade-off, 15 for 15. Everson Griffin, maybe they still look into kicking the tires on him, but to be honest, he's going to probably be a $10 million guy. So I like the move. It just shows the initiative with Andrew Berry and with the Cleveland Browns and with Olivier Vernon. So, all right, let's move on to the next part of this, right? We talked about Derrick Henry earlier. We talked a little bit about the money regarding running backs, right? 4 years, $50 million. He's going to at least be on the team for the next 2 years. If this is part of your strategy, you liked how he played. Listen, I've already aired my grievance on the Derrick Henry extension, tagging him earlier about how to handle that situation. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. 4 years on a running back. Listen, when only 2 years are guaranteed, I don't think it's a lot of money with $50 million. Talking about like $12.5 million over 2 years. I don't think he adds enough to the passing game per se that I would be comfortable paying him that much. I feel like maybe I would have preferred maybe closer to $10 million, but I get it. If that's part of your strategy, you get the downhill running style. It's not what I would do, right? I would prefer a running back who can catch out of the backfield to be my every down guy. But if it's part of your developed strategy, you have this I formation, we're going to hit him hard. We know Derrick Henry can run through guys. He's a tank, and he's got long speed for days. I get the idea here. There's a strategy to it. I know a lot of the analytics guys, which I don't really consider myself as much analytics as I kind of am, but I am. I'm pro analytics. I'm pro using the data. So yes, I think that there's a big talk about the contract structures and values, and we talk about that a lot on this podcast. And with Derrick Henry, you're paying a running back $12.5 million. You're really paying him really high for a running back. You're talking about in the upper echelons of running back contracts. And I understand why they did it. It's not what I would do. I probably wouldn't have tagged him going into the year because I would have probably tagged Tannehill so I can kind of see what he's going to do. But it is what it is at this point. He's part of what they want to do with this team. So, talking about running back news and weird contract situations, Raheem Mostert, right, of the nearly Super Bowl winning San Francisco 49ers, he already did kind of a contract extension a year or two ago. He's got no money guaranteed on the contract. He performed really well in the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. He's demanded a trade. Another guy's demanding a trade in the offseason. I think he's really looking to try to get a little bit more money out of him because, again, like he kind of feels like he's kind of SOL. He can't make more money. He's got a lot of years left on that deal now. It's like, I think it's 3 years and really only capping out at about $4 million. I honestly don't think he would make much more on the open market anyway. He played well. He played better than Tevin Coleman. He played better than a lot of other guys, but he wasn't and he's got good breakaway speed. I just don't think that, and they trade Matt Breida, so I think they are committed to using him. I just don't think he's got I don't think he's got a lot of leverage. I also don't think that he's got a lot to do, there's no reason to trade him. He's also probably not going to make that much more if he gets traded to another team anyway. Also, I didn't mention this in the beginning, but Dak Prescott signed his franchise tag tender, and there was no extension by the deadline today, which I think is the biggest deal. Shaq Barrett signed his tender today as well, because as of recording this podcast, this is when we are on the day of July 15th. Shaq Barrett signed his tender, but no extension was done for him. That was kind of more foreseeable. But the Dak Prescott thing, right? this is continuing to be a weird situation. Like, we are now kind of confirming that Dak Prescott might not be on this team, probably won't be on this team next year. There just does not seem to be an agreement on the money or the years on the contract, right? And that seems to be the big disagreement, right? He's okay with an average salary structure of like a certain amount, but only over 4 years. If you want 5 years, you got to give him more on average. I kind of agree with him. I actually think I agree with Dak a lot on this, right? I think the Cowboys are screwing this up. They screwed the pooch every step of the way on this, and it keep on raising the amount because guess what? Other deals go on, right? The longer you wait, your leverage keeps on getting weaker. So they no longer have leverage. They can't extend him now. So it's going to be going into this year. He's on the franchise tag. He's got a 1-year deal making $30-something million. I think Dak's a really good player. I think he's at least in the top 15 as far as quarterbacks in the NFL. I do think he is, like I said before, the souped-up Andy Dalton. Maybe they're looking to see what they can get out of Andy Dalton in camp. Maybe they say, you know what, we'll just franchise tag him next year too. Keep in mind, like, it's not like it's cheap to franchise tag him, right? You got to do 120% on top of what he's making now. So that's going to be pricey. But I am excited to see him play going into this year. I think, especially with all the weapons that are going to be around him going into the year. Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, a lot of great players. I remember I was talking about trades. That's just a little bit of a tangent here, but I think this is a valuable one, right? I was talking to a couple of Cowboys fans because there's a lot of talk about Jamal Adams, where he might go. And I didn't really touch on, like, potential trade targets because I feel like maybe I should have did that a little bit. But so a lot of Cowboys fans are interested, right? There's a lot of talk he wants to be a Cowboy. There's even like a video out there, and there was a talk about like what would be the value for this. We talked a little bit about the trade value, and I was talking to some people, and I'm like, what about a second-round pick in Michael Gallup? And there are some Cowboys fans who value Michael Gallup like a first-round pick. They would not trade him for less than that. I'm saying, by the way, PFF loved him coming out in the draft, so they valued him at a first-round pick in the NFL draft the year he came out. So PFF, you're doing your job really well. Dude, Michael Gallup, I think he's developed really well. I'm just shocked that there's that much value. Like, people really like him that much. Like, I thought he was kind of the forgotten son. Like, I wanted to talk about him a lot. You know, we're going to get into fantasy next week. We're at the time. We're going to talk about fantasy. We're going to talk about the future of the NFL, and we're going to go into the season, right? I'm going to pretend, starting next week, I'm going to pretend there's going to be football. I promise. It's been hard, but I love it anyway. I love all of you. Thank you for tuning in. We're not done yet. Hang on. Talk about the Washington McSynders team, right? They are officially announced they are changing their names. There's been a FedEx and Nike say we're not gonna do business with you anymore. And Nike and Amazon were taking their jerseys off the store, and Mr. McSynders looked around the room and said, "Well, this is financially hurting us. We got to do this differently. How about we change the name? We were looking at changing the name. 2 days later, they said we're changing the name. So there's a lot of talk about the types of names they might do. The Washington Red Tails is a big one because it evokes you can keep the R, like the alternative letter R, the color scheme a little bit, and it kind of evokes like a military vibe. Also, now you are evoking in essence to African American pilots who fought and fought for this country. I think that's a great way of going about it. I liked my alternatives for this were the Washington Warhogs, right? That was my big one. I pushed that on my on the Instagram. If you watch the Instagram and the TikTok, I went Warhogs on this. I've been pushing that hard. Guess what? So this is the fun part of the story, right? I'm not saying I'm the only one who said Warhogs, by the way. I'm just saying it was my personal favorite, the one that I came up with in my head. I'm like, we could do if you pick the Warhogs, you could do a little thing with Timon and Pumbaa, right? You could do a deal with Disney, right? You could have a kind of evokes the mindset of the old the Hogs, the Washington Hogs, the line, if you will, the Gibbs era of the Washington team. So you can sort of there's already like a hog mentality to them. So, but there's been other names, the Warriors, the Generals, the Capitals, some of the other names that have been out there, the Senators, the Sentinels. So I get all those names. They're all very fun. So what happened was, now that they've announced this, I've mentioned this before. I'm an attorney. And I happen to know a bit about trademark. In fact, I did a video on trademark relatively recently. It's on the same link on this. It's on this this platform on the YouTube. You can check it out. But I was just talking about a recent Supreme Court case on trademark. That's besides the point. But apparently somebody went ahead and filed what's called an ITU, the trademark application, the 1B application, which is basically you're saying, I intend to use this mark for interstate commerce. They are registering it with the trademark office. They registered like 50 different marks, right? They registered the red tails. They registered the generals, the warhogs. They registered the warhogs. Yes, I am winning it. I don't even know if I'm the only one who said warhogs, but not warthogs, by the way. And I also said warthogs would be a good one too. But warhogs, hogs. Wink. They did it. They trademarked it. I'm like, I love you, Mo. I love you, man. I don't know who did this. They did like 50 of them. Dude, rock on. By the way, it's probably not going to really last. You have to prove, like, it's... I would love to do an episode on this. In fact, we will talk about it on my other podcast called Punk Law 101, right? Trademark, we are going to touch on that relatively soon. We touched on it a little bit on an episode a couple weeks ago talking about the Supreme Court cases. In fact, we just dropped an episode yesterday about the last 5 Supreme Court opinions that came out for this session. Go check it out. It's actually a fun podcast. That was probably the best episode. If you're wondering what I've been working on during this time, a little bit away, go ahead, check all this stuff out. I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. You can follow the podcast at DraftVice on Twitter, at DraftVice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. Punch. Like that delicious drink you drink in the summer, or the thing you do to clowns when they hide in your closet. And then also, you can follow the podcast on the TikTok, right? The little app the Chinese people that made. I don't know if that's going to last past... I'm going to get canceled after this one, right? But, yes, you can follow it on the TikTok. Hopefully that doesn't get banned, or even if it doesn't, we'll be on the Instagram, too. And thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Take care. Farewell. Goodbye.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous about the past and about the future.